baby, listen to me speak it. No matter what, just let it go.
Pop, Perswayable. What is going on, boo-boos? I got a dad joke for you really quickly. What do you call a pig with 4 eyes? Pig. Oh, so stupid. All right, today we are going to talk about what's possibly coming out, a Cipher machine debuff. The decoding speed is being nerfed according to what's being released on the test server, which means it is not 100% finalized yet, but this is really big news. A lot of people have been complaining about the Cipher machine decoding process for years. All right. Now, the reason why the devs haven't historically touched it, they've touched individual characters to slow down the decoding process. For instance, as an example, when Mechanic was first released, she had an 8% decode buff to all of her teammates, right? So over the years, they have slowed down decoding by individual characters, including the Mechanic, NERF, etc. But for the most part, we saw that Hunter win rates were higher than survivors in every tier, pretty much on every server. So that's the reason why the devs haven't touched this historically for years. But the last time we talked about that, the last time the devs gave that information out was like over a year and a half ago. A lot has changed. So whether you agree with the devs or not, that's the reason why we haven't seen too much of a drastic change. And even with the devs' logic, to counter the devs' logic, this has been an ongoing complaint for years, and we have seen very, very slow queue times in certain servers for hunters that has affected how long it takes for survivors to find matches. So with that being said, let's talk about some of the Cipher machine adjustments that are coming. Since I don't have my own translation team anymore, which I am trying to hire some translators, especially if you live in China or Hong Kong, so we can partner. That would really be beneficial so I can get my own translations. But in the meantime, I am getting this from somebody called Identity V Clue from Instagram. I did contact them, let them know that I was going to use their material. So I just wanted to give them proper credit for providing this information. I did check on Weibo and saw the original artwork and information there. I just can't translate it. All right, so Cipher machine adjustments. The initial Cipher machine's decoding time has been increased from 81 to 88 seconds. That's a 7-second increase. Survivors' decoding acceleration has been adjusted in stages from 30% in 210 seconds in the beginning. Is now adjusted to 10% in 100 seconds, 40% in 210 seconds, and 60% in 280 seconds. We're going to go through all this. Speed limit for Cipher machines. In the multiplayer, cooperative, decoding, and arbitrary decoding acceleration stages, the decoding time for a 2-person cooperative Cipher machine cannot be less than 45 seconds, and the decoding time for a single-person Cipher machine cannot be less than 40 seconds. When the calibration of each position fails, the decoding progress will be decreased, but if the calibration is perfected, the decoding speed will be increased. If the calibration is not checked 1 to 2, 3 to 4, 5 to 6, 7 times, the Cipher machine process will be reduced by 0, 1, 1, and 2% respectively. And if the calibration is perfected, the Cipher machine process will be increased by 2, 2, 1, and 1% when it is checked 1 to 2, 3 to 4, 5 to 6, and 7 times. Wow, a lot of information. So how about we go through this, all right? So let's go through that first one. The initial Cipher machine's decoded time has been increased from 81 to 88 seconds, okay? So this pretty much means that decoding is being slowed down for everybody. Now, the 81 to 88 seconds, it's going to take 88 seconds for a regular character with no decode, buff, or nerf. This is just your standard character. So that means that if you play a character like Mind's Eye, it's going to be a little bit less than that. However, it's going to be increased from what it currently is. More so, this now means that characters who have a percentage of a debuff or a decode, and think of your mercenary or your wildling or your forward, it's going to take them even longer because that percentage still applies. So instead of it being 81 seconds, that extra 7 seconds that has been added, you have to counter that into the 30%, 25%, or whatever the decode and debuff is of that character. So this may put a value on characters that can actually decode faster. We'll see how that works, because we all know how the kiting is in this game. All right, let's talk to the to the second point. Survivor's decoding acceleration has been adjusted in stages. So currently right now, when the game hits 210 seconds, that's when you see the accelerated decoding indicator. That is when everyone's decoding is now increased by 30%. Okay? When accelerated decoding happens, your decoding increases by 30%, happens at 210 seconds in the game. That's being adjusted now. So now what's going to happen is once the match hits the 100-second mark, your decoding is going to increase by 10%. All right? Now, if you factor in some of the basic numbers in there, that means that most likely, instead of it being 88 seconds, it might be 79.5, give or take. Which means that pretty much for the first 100 seconds, the decoding slower. From 100 seconds to 210 seconds, decoding is slightly faster than what it is now. Just slightly faster. Before right now's accelerated decoding. So that's an important point. The 10% only happens at 100 seconds. The 40% doesn't happen until 210 seconds. And the 60% doesn't happen until 280 seconds. So is this a decoding nerf or is it an adjustment? Because it is going to go a hell of a lot faster later in the game than what it currently does. If it's, at that 210 seconds where you finally hit that 40%, now what's going to happen is once you hit that 210 seconds, the decoding is faster than what it currently is right now. Right? Because right now at 210 seconds, decoding is increased at 30%. Now that 210 is going to be increased to 40%. So it's actually a 10% increase for that. And then when it's at 280 seconds, it's going to be increased up to another 20% to that 60% mark. So this is more of a Cipher machine adjustment, in my opinion, rather than it just being a straight up nerf. There's going to come a time where late game it's going to get a lot faster. So really this is going to put a lot of pressure on hunters to do very well early game to mid game. That's going to be the bulk. So somebody could make the argument that if somebody's opening kite is a 3 cipher kite, it's much more meaningful now. So in a weird way, if you have a very, very good kite early game, and you're not giving up in the first 60 seconds, you're only helping your team later on in the match. The other question about this decoding adjustment is how is this going to affect characters like Dreamwitch? Because what's going to happen is that as the game goes on further and further, people are going to be able to decode faster and faster. Which means Dreamwitch will still be scary on small maps, but on the bigger maps, it might be a little bit more difficult. Does this now mean that hunter or survivors who decode faster have a bigger stock value when it comes to late game? So that's one of the ways that I'm thinking. I may not be right here. Remember, this news just came out today. I don't have a whole week to digest this and to break it down. But in my mind, I'm like, wait a minute. This is really good for early game. This is really good for the first 210 seconds for hunters. All right? But then once it goes above 210 seconds, that's where it's going to get scary. So the other question would therefore be, is this going to make rescue characters better? Because if rescue characters with decode and debuffs, if they can kite better with their forward football, wildling hog, if everyone can survive longer, their decode and debuff is going to be offset by the accelerate and decode and increase. So what are your thoughts on that? I would like to know that in the YouTube comments. There's a lot here. I don't have a lot of time to really to process it all. That's the thing. I wish I could sit down with all the numbers and make an opinion. So this is more about giving you the information and presenting some of the arguments for both sides. Speed limit for Cipher machines in the multiplayer cooperative decoding and arbitrary decoding acceleration stages. The decoding time for a 2-person cooperative Cipher machine cannot be less than 45 seconds, and the decoding time for a single-person Cipher machine cannot be less than 40 seconds. So they're capping. They're going to cap all of the survivors that have the decoding buffs. So you can only do so much, right? Probably wouldn't be fair if you had two mind's eyes on the same cipher machine. So that's probably a good thing for the hunter. They're making sure that the fast decoders can't have an overwhelming advantage. Now, what's interesting about this last part is how useful it is. When the calibration of each position fails, the decoding progress will be decreased. But if the calibration is perfected, the decoding speed will be increased. If the calibration is not checked, the cipher machine process will be reduced. And if the calibration is perfected, the cipher machine process will be increased. But we all know that the cipher machine stuff is pretty easy. It's not like Dead by Daylight, where hitting that perfect spot is difficult to do. Now, I'm not sure if Thief has been nerfed, but last that I knew, with Thief, he increased calibrations, which means that you're more likely to get this. So with a lot of people, give me 1 second. So this whole calibration thing, all right? Well, not a lot of people fail those calibrations. Sometimes they do if there's lag, etc., etc. So the question is how often are these calibrations going to occur, right? Because they do occur quite infrequently, but pretty much you can now have a cipher machine regress if you're missing calibrations. So that makes me wonder about mechanics doll. Is this going to affect mechanics doll? Because you're talking now up to a 6% decrease in calibrations. So you got to really pay attention using her. But I'm not really sure how much this is going to affect, because calibrations are relatively easy in Identity V. This only seems like it's going to help the survivors. Now, there are some implications to the survivors, but it does seem like over time there'll be up to a 4, 5, 6% increase in the decoding. So those calibrations, to a degree, you could say offset the nerf, right? Because it went from 81 to 88 seconds. But if you're saying that you can hit, a few calibrations, the issue is that you can't look at it from a static standpoint. I can't just say, okay, well, it went from 81 to 88 seconds, but if we look at 7 times and realize that after hitting perfect calibrations for 7 times, we have to offset 6% of that. That doesn't always work like that. Calibrations come sometimes frequently, sometimes infrequently, and sometimes we're off of the decoding as well. So I think this brings a good twist, but I don't think it should be the end result. I think that they should tinker with this one a little bit. I think that's an important point. If the calibration is not checked, the cipher machine progress will be reduced. So I don't know how useful that's really going to be. But my point of this is to really give my knee-jerk reaction. I'd like some of the YouTube comments. This is not a final analysis. The cipher machine adjustment is not 100% official yet. I mean, it's come out. Word is that it's on the test server, or will be. And I checked those sources myself. They're pretty credible. So it's trending on Weibo as well. But I feel like I need more time to really sit down and look at what this implies, what all of this stuff implies. The last part, maybe I'm underestimating it. I just don't think it's going to be that big of a deal for people who aren't missing their calibrations. I think that's an important point because it says the calibration is not checked. So maybe a way to buff that further would be if you're not getting a perfect calibration, it slightly reduces it, but I'm not sure how that would work. Based on the translation I'm getting, it seems like it's based on your ability just to hit the calibration regardless of being perfect in order to reduce the reduction or the chances of the reduction. But I just don't know how I feel about this. There are some hunters who are really good late game. My question is, what about photographer? What is this going to do to photographer? Photographer, and it really needs to hope that they can get somebody down. And if they can't, they used to be able to slow the game down slowly but surely. But I'm wondering really what the effects are of this for those slowed down hunters. And again, I think that what this is really going to do is this is, in a weird way, I think that if survivors are, I mean, maybe, see, I'm in my head, I'm thinking differently. Now this is going to require people to kite longer in the opening kite, if anything. That's what that means. So, on average, right now in Tier 5, a lot of survivors are dead while one cipher is halfway. So, it seems like this is really going to help hunters secure those early games. It really does. But it's one of those things where, again, if you can kite for a while, I mean, I don't know. You're talking 88% now. You're a 60-second kite might not any longer be good enough. I had to edit that real quick. My bad. I don't know how I feel about it. I think that this is really gonna hurt the hunters who have to really rely on a slowed down game. This is gonna put a little bit more pressure on hunters doing good early game. There are some hunters that they were able to recover late game and mid game. And I feel like with these adjustments, if you have a bad early game, like a pretty bad early game, it's only going to make it worse in the long run. So I feel like all of this adjustment puts a lot of emphasis on hunters doing very well in the beginning. But then I don't necessarily have to say very well, because now you have a little bit more wiggle room in terms of taking survivors down. So this puts more pressure on the early game kite. It's almost as if you have a really good early game kite, your late game is more guaranteed. So I don't know. I want to hear your opinions on this. Give me your input. I'll come back maybe a week later with my in-depth analysis, but I have a lot of thoughts. This is one take, right? You saw the video games playing. It's not like I can cut this up and make it fucking perfect. It's not my style because I'm too dumb. But tell me what your thoughts are. All right, I made this video way too long. You all have a beautiful day now. Bye-bye. Tell me what you think.